Our speaker tonight is actually an alum from UIU. He graduated from the Waterloo Center in 1990, and he's the former vice president of Harley Davidson. Just help me welcome him and his wife Michelle at UIU. Thank you.
Nailed it.
Easy to follow up, right?
So hello, everybody. Hi. No, we're going to give you one more shot at that. Hello, everybody. Hi. All right, that's better. What I'd like to do, as they said, I graduated here in May of 1990, before most of you were born. I understand that. Okay, but the key part for me was how to tie continuing education into your career goals. And that's what I really kind of like to talk to you about tonight. I'm not going to do a lot of talking, all right? I would like to do a lot of listening. I'd like to hear what's on your mind and answer your questions. So all I'm going to do is give you a little bit of my background, where I came from, where my continuing education came in as a benefit for me, and then I want to hear from you. That fair? Be thinking about all those questions that you always wanted to ask a vice president of Harley Davidson, okay? Even though I am retired. Okay, so I was born in a small town in Iowa. I am one of 15 children. Okay, I'm number 4 out of 15. My parents did an outstanding job of teaching us integrity and the value of hard work. Okay, my father was probably the best mechanic that I've ever met in my life. He could work on anything. And we always had supper together. As soon as we were done, this will tell you how chauvinistic we were back then, the girls, there are 8 girls and 7 boys in our family, the girls would all get up and do the dishes, and the boys would all go out in the garage with my father. And you didn't get just to watch my father, you had a job every day, okay? He'd give you something to do, and he would not tell you how to do it. He'd say, what does it look like you need to do? And then he'd work with you. And so any one of us boys wanted to be good mechanics. He taught us how to do that. So at age 12, there's a little filling station, a little gas station in Gilbertville, and the guy had a sign in the window that says, "Help wanted." So I went in. I says, "Hi, my name is Steve. I'd like to work here." Well, he says, "I'm really looking for somebody that could change tires and do brake jobs and that kind of stuff." And I said, "I can do that." "Yeah, right. How old are you?" "I'm 12. He said, "Well, you know, maybe I'll talk to your dad." And I said, "My dad's at home. I'll run up and get him." So I went up and got my dad, come back. And long story short, Dad tells him, he says, "Oh yeah, he can do brake jobs. In fact, he just last week overhauled his first Chevrolet 6-cylinder engine on his own." Okay? So that's the kind of teacher my father was. So I got that job, and I worked for that gentleman about 30 hours a week from the time I was 12 until about 3 years after I graduated from high school. So, and I kept up reasonably good grades. So went to the local parochial school there, grade school, high school. It's a school called Don Bosco High School. Don't know if any of you ever heard of it. So anyway, I get done with high school. I did fairly well, graduated from there, had an opportunity to go to college, but quite frankly, finances were not exactly what you probably need to go do that, and I really didn't want to go to school. I just did not. I wanted to go to work at John Deere, okay? And so, as soon as I graduated, I went up, put my application in. A gentleman named Bill Davis came out and he talked to me and he said, "Sir, I circled this. You can't work here, you're 17. I said, "I know." He said, "Then why'd you put your application in? I want you to know that I want to work here." And I came back every week after that, and each week he would say, "You're only 17, I can't hire you." "I know, but I want you to know I want to work here." So he made me a promise. He said, "You come back on your 18th birthday and not before that, and I'll interview you myself." So I came back, was sitting in the room when Bill walked out, and he goes, "Well, happy birthday, Mr. Phillips, come on in." And I got hired, and he talked me into going into an apprentice training program, okay? So I went to school for 4 years at John Deere while I was working there. And I graduated as a machine tool repairman, went on to specialize in hydraulic repair, and then quite frankly I was working with a bunch of the guys in the union And they said, hey, why don't you run for union steward? I said, all right, I'll run for union steward. And the guys elected me. And I thought that was quite a privilege because you're elected by your peers. So I quickly got the contract and I memorized it from cover to cover. I also took some classes in conflict resolution, conflict management, because I figure I'm going to be going in and talking to these guys. They really have the upper hand. They're management, we're union, right? So quickly, I got a reputation for being extremely fair and extremely knowledgeable about the contract, okay? So about a year later, one of the managers came up to me and he said, would you consider going on salary? I said, I'd take a look at it. So I ended up going on salary. I was a maintenance planner on third shift, then second shift, then first shift. After that, they came up to me and said, would you like to go on as a supervisor? So I was a supervisor on third shift, and then second shift, and then first shift. And by that time, they started to recognize that I could get people to do what I wanted them to do by associating with them. And I guess that's what you call good leadership skills, right? So they asked me to be the general supervisor of all of maintenance. So I took that job on, and I had now 800 technicians in about a 6 million square foot facility that worked for me for all three shifts, okay? And I was feeling really good about that. So one day, the general manager called me in and he says, you know, you got a good reputation here and you're doing a great job and all that kind of stuff, but you aren't going any further without a further education. All I had was a high school education, all right? And I said, well, you know, I don't know how I'd work it in, going back to school and all that stuff. And he says, I'm just going to be fair with you. You've done a great job, and if you want to retire here as a general supervisor of maintenance, you're in. Not a problem. You want to go further, you better go get some education. So I actually was off. In 1981, I was off for a little while. I had back surgery. And this buddy of mine, Bob Osborne, came out to me and he says, hey, have you heard about the coordinated off-campus degree program at Upper Iowa University? Nope. Do you know what Upper Iowa University is? Yeah, I know it's in Fayette. That much I knew, right? So he brought me all the literature out and I read through it. Long story short, he helped me get registered, and I used that time to get started, and then went on with the program. Spent a couple of weeks up here in a residency requirement, and then in May of 1990 I graduated magna cum laude from that program. And as much as I protested and said, I'm not going to the graduation. I mean, adults don't do that, right? You know? Somebody insisted that all the trouble she'd been through, taking care of the kids and doing everything else while I was getting my degree and working and doing all that kind of stuff, she said, you're going. And you know what I told her? Yes, dear. And I was glad I did. Our daughters came up for it. Her parents came up for it. It was quite a special night for us. I then went on to University of Northern Iowa, UNI, got my master's degree in industrial technology. And then I happened to be speaking at a conference, an ASME conference in Milwaukee. And when I was done, this gentleman came up to me, little bitty guy, and he says, excuse the language here, but I gotta say it like he said. He says, you believe all that shit? I said, I wouldn't be saying it if I didn't believe in it, okay? And he says, how'd you like to come to work for another company? No. I don't know if you know anything about John Deere or whatever, but at that time, they had a program called 30 and out, okay? If you have 30 years of service, no matter what your age is, you have a full boat retirement, okay? I had 26 and a half years in, and I left, okay? All of my friends thought I was absolutely insane. But I remember talking to this man, and he didn't tell me what company he was with. He just talked to me a little bit. This guy gives me a call about a week later, and he said, you remember the gentleman you talked there? He'd like you to fly out and do an interview at their company. I said, well, what company is it? Well, I'm not at liberty to say. I said, well, then the answer is no. Well, he says, I can give you a hint. It's a major motorcycle manufacturer located in York, Pennsylvania. I said, okay, that's enough of a hint for me. Yeah, I'll go out to take an interview with Harley Davidson Motor Company. So I flew out there, spent 2 days walking the floor, talking with Tom, and quite frankly, my last 10 years at John Deere was all about rebuilding the factory and getting it lean and taking all the waste out. And I walked into this factory and went, oh my goodness. I mean, it was unbelievably bad. I remember the only question I asked Tom is I said, do you people make any money? And he goes, yeah, we do. We do pretty well. I said, then you ought to buy your own personal dump truck to take your paycheck to the bank when you get this fixed. He said, can you fix it? I said, yes, sir. And long story short, I flew home. I walked in the house and my wife looks at me and said, oh my God, you're going to do this. I said, no. And she said, no, I haven't seen that look on your face in 5 years, okay? So long story short, 3 weeks later, I'm there. And spent the first 5 or 6 years of my career with Harley, rebuilding the factories and trying to get lean concepts in and all that kind of stuff. But I think the important piece is to understand that when I went for this interview, I absolutely guarantee you that if I didn't have that degree on my resume, they wouldn't even have talked to me, all right? I wouldn't have got that opportunity. And then you start to take a look at that and you say, how many career opportunities are lost because people give up on their dreams of continuing education, right? And I will tell you that if it was completely up to me, if I hadn't had her support, I probably would have quit 2 or 3 times because it's tough. You know, your day consists of getting up, going to work, and then after work immediately going to class, then going to the library, getting home 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then doing it all over again the next day, right? And then try to squeeze our girls' sports and those kinds of things into. It's tough. It was a tough push, but absolutely the best decision. Our CEO at that time, a gentleman named Jeff Bluestein, said, you know what, I'm impressed with your degrees, but what I'm really impressed with is the fact that you did all of this while you were working, while you were raising a family, while you're doing all that kind of stuff. He said, I'm going to make you an offer today, okay? And I took the offer, obviously. I worked there. I started as the Director of Manufacturing and Engineering Services, so basically I had all of the plant facilities. I then went on to be the Director of Operations, left there and went up to Tomahawk, Wisconsin as the General Manager of that facility, and then was offered the opportunity for Vice President of Quality, Operational Excellence and Technical Services in Milwaukee in 1999. I took that position and I retired from there in 2010. Okay? I think the key thing that I want to tell you is that all those opportunities beyond that general supervisor's job, I'm the same person, okay? I'm the same guy, whether I had that education or not. All that opportunity would have been lost. I would not have been given that opportunity. So to me, the continuing education and then focusing that continuing education around where you want to take your career is ultimately important. Okay, that's enough from me. Now let's have those questions. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start with the second question because nobody ever asked the first. So second question, please. Come on, one of you troublemakers back there, give it to me. There we go.
So like when you started working, you were kind of already like in your field, and you knew what you were kind of in some way you knew where you were headed. But like when we're in college, we don't really have that work experience, and we don't like really know what we want to do. So it's hard to decide where you can take your education to make the right choices in your education.
Sure.
To get them more out of it.
Sure. Here's my suggestion to you.
Would you best to summarize that question?
Oh, great, yes. I'll summarize the question. Basically, the statement really was, I was in a field. I knew kind of where I wanted to go, and therefore I knew what to do with my education. If we don't know exactly what career we want, how do we know what path to take in our education as well. Is that correct? Okay. I don't think you can, I think you have to have a little bit of an idea of where you wanted to go. When I used to mentor people inside of the motor company, they'd come to me and say, can you help me? And I'd say, what do you want to be in 5 years? And they'd say, I don't know. I said, then I can't help you. Okay? But I'd ask them questions like, do you want to be the president of the motor company? Or do you want to be the vice president of engineering? And they go, what difference does it make? It makes a huge difference. If you want to be the president of the motor company and you're an engineer, you've got to get on engineering. You've got to broaden your field. You've got to be far more general than that, because we don't just take engineers and make them into presidents of companies, right? They've got to have a broad education. However, if you want to be the vice president of engineering, then stay in engineering, work hard, and try to work your way up, okay? The same thing I think is true. You've got to have a little bit of an idea of what, if you stop and thought and said, what do I want to be doing in 5 years? Okay? And I know it's a tough decision because there's so many opportunities. But it is the whole field of business is not, I mean, you can narrow it down a little bit, right? I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to dig ditches. I don't want to do this. Pretty soon you narrow the field, right? And then you take a look and say, well, if the field was even this broad, what are the common denominators that I absolutely have to have in education to be successful there? All right? To me, there are, how do I want to say, interchangeable skills. Okay? So if I was successful as a leader in maintenance, how did I become a successful leader in customer service? Because they're completely different. Those transferable skills are the skills that be with you no matter what job you're going to do. And if you can use those transferable skills to move yourself along your career path, you can learn the other things as you go. So it's kind of like saying, I want to go to California. I want to go to San Diego, California. And you plot out a path, okay? And you start out and you go, whoa, that road's closed. You don't give up your goal, right? I still want to get there. You just have to take another path, right? And those things will happen to you in your career as well. But I think the key is narrow the field down as much as you possibly can. Find out what those transferable skills are within any of those fields. And then look at your education to make sure that you're developing those transferable skills. Is that a fair, okay? All right, great. So question number 3. All right, we got a troublemaker in the back, go.
No, I'm just curious because when you flew out, and I mean, you're going to a whole new area and they, pay for you to get there and whatever, what kind of, or did you encounter any kind of resentment from people who had been there for years and they thought like that was something that they were gunning for, and then you just kind of showed up and they're like, well, who's this guy?
Okay, the question again was, okay, you went out to this factory. Did you run into any resentment from people who said, wow, I was gunning for that position. I thought I should have had a chance, and here they bring in this hot shot from wherever, right? Absolutely, okay? That's where those transferable skills come in, okay? Here's a key. I think nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I spent the first 3 or 4 months going around, and I didn't tell them what I could do or those kinds of things. I could show them that. I wanted to know about them. How long have you been here? What are you doing? What's going on? You have any tips for me? Is there anything I should know? Are there any booby traps here that if I don't watch out for, I'll be blown up? And pretty soon, you get a few of them that say, hey, this guy's not bad. And so pretty soon you kind of work. Well, then you can start demonstrating what you know, all right? I had 10 years of fixing a major company. I could have started on day 1 to fix this company, but I'd have been shut down. Absolutely would have been shut down. So I spent a lot of time getting to know the people and talking about it, asking them questions. If you were to do this job, how would you start? Well, I wouldn't know how to start. Well, let me give you a couple of hints of what we could do and how we could do it. And it's very diplomatic. The gentleman that I was talking about, this little guy, he had a theory. When you're growing a company, You want a third, a third, and a third. You want a third of the people to be promoted from within, so you never lose the heritage and the history of the company. I want a third of the people that have been there, done that, and done it well in other companies, so they can come in and lead the people in something that they maybe don't know how to do. That's how I got there. And then he wanted a third of you people. He wanted a third of people that didn't know that something couldn't be done. He wanted the fresh ideas. He wanted you to bring in those kinds of things that said, yeah, I've never tested this, but I've learned this, and here's where I wanted to go. And that's how he built the company. About a third of the people that he promoted were from within. A third of us came from outside because we've been there, we've done that. And a third of it came from academics. Came out of colleges, came out of universities. We had relationship with a lot of universities, and we hired people out of there. That answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Other questions? I'm going to pick on the Gilbertville kid if none of the other ones will speak up. Go ahead. Give me a question.
What's the biggest piece of advice you would give a small town Iowa boy in making it big like you did?
Well, I think there's several elements that were in there, right? Integrity, always, okay? If you do not have integrity, people will see through you in just a heartbeat, right? It's the old saying, you know, do as I say, not as I do. Nobody's fooled. Nobody's fooled. If you're not doing what you're saying, no one's fooled. You may think you are, but you're not. So integrity, in my opinion, is number one. Number two is just downright hard work, okay? I had 9 lateral moves within John Deere. Those are moves where you took on another job, you got no additional pay for it or whatever, and usually you were taking over something that was pretty much broke, okay? And every time they'd ask, I'd say, yep, I'll take that. What ended up being is when they were looking for a director to run one of the divisions, they looked around and said, holy smokes, look, this guy's been in 9 or 10 different areas. He knows the entire company. I was almost a shoo-in for that position, as long as I had my education, all right? If I think that dedication to task, integrity, and the other thing I think is just this willingness to do whatever it takes to get there. And I think the world looks out for people who are out there working hard and doing their best, okay? You don't have to remind people you're doing your best. They'll see it. And I think that's really what I consider to be a couple of the real keys. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what motivates you, what keeps you going.
Okay. What motivates me? What keeps me going? First, I had to get over my shyness. Yeah, right. Okay. I've always, coming out of a large family, okay, we didn't have a lot of things unless you worked hard for them, right? And so I think initially I found out that if I was willing to work hard, I could have a lot of things that I didn't have before, right? The other thing I think is really comes a positive attitude, you know? And I know that's easy to say and sometimes tough to do. I think somebody asked me today, says, how you doing? I said, I was born wonderful and got better every day since. It was this gentleman right here that asked me that. That's how I believe. You know, I think if you don't believe, I'll give you an old, this is my good friend Benny Suggs. He's a 2-star admiral that worked for me. And excuse the language again, it's not that bad, but he says, if you don't believe you're shit hot, who else should? Right? And that's just what it's, you know, seriously, you don't have to flaunt it, you don't have to brag, but you're on top of your game every single day. And guess what? You're going to have some bad days, but the bad days are even better because you at least have a positive attitude. So, and I don't believe you can motivate people. I believe people are either motivated or they're not. But if they are motivated, you can do a lot of things to clear paths for them so that they can move on and do great things. And as a leader, that's what I believe my role was. When you got somebody that's really sparking and motivated and everything else, kick the barriers down. Let them go. Yes, sir. Did you have your hand up? Oh, you did. I'm sorry. I saw a hand over there somewhere.
Yeah, you said when you first started with the company, you didn't quite like start jumping into things because you had to be a little bit diplomatic and build like relationships. How did you find that when you were, you know, getting deep into the company and having a lot of responsibilities besides building relationships, how did you maintain relationships with the people that you already started with?
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Key is, she said you started off flow building relationships, but then eventually you got a lot more responsibility. How did you go about maintaining those relationships? You do it just like you maintain any other relationship, right? You spend a lot of time doing it. I was telling your president here on the way over, this gentleman named Jim McCaslin and I used to go out. We had the York facility. It's over 1 million square foot, about 7,000 people on 3 shifts. And every month we would go out. We saw a lot of the people on first shift. We spend a lot of time on the floor walking around doing those kinds of things. But every month we'd go out on second shift, we'd walk around, and we'd shake the hand of every single person in the plant and ask them, anything you want to ask us, whatever. Well, the first couple times they weren't prepared for it, right? Well, after they knew we'd come back, they had questions prepared for us, and we'd usually be there till the third shift would come in, and then we'd go out and do the whole same thing with third shift, and then about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd go home, and then we'd come back at 6:30, 7 o'clock the next morning. We do that once a month, and although once a month doesn't sound like a lot, it's more than anyone else had ever done. Everybody in that plant knew us by face, by name, and felt they could come up and talk to us. And you know, when you get all of the people pulling for you because they like you or they're willing to work for you, your job is really, really easy. So that's kind of how we maintained it. Yes, sir. Afraid to be wrong? Yeah. Oh, hell no, I was wrong more than I was right. Oh, hey, take a look at who's the best batter in the history of baseball. What was it was batting average? Anybody knows? Okay, what was his batting average?
360.
350. So what was his not hitting average? 650, right? So he struck out twice as many times as he hit the ball, and he is a hero, right? Don't be afraid to strike out, okay? If you're not making mistakes, you're not out there on the edge, right? And if you're not out on the edge, you're average. If you're average, they're looking by you, right? You got to be willing to make some mistakes. Now, here's my key. Good process, good failure. Bad process, bad failure. So in other words, if you didn't look through it and say, what could happen if we do this, and you fail, that's not good failure, right? That's bad failure. You should have looked. But guess what? You can do the best planning in the world that you can, and you can still fail. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So to me, now here's the other piece of advice. Don't fail on the same thing twice, okay? That doesn't look good. But those are, seriously, don't be afraid to fail. And if you're afraid to fail, you'll pull back. If you pull back, somebody's going to pass you by. Guarantee you. World's full of competitive people like all of you, right? So don't pull back. Other questions? Yes, sir. Okay, get you, Nick, and then I'll get him. Go ahead.
You had shared a story with me last year about your time overseas. I don't know if you remember this. You have been working with a mechanic. I forget if it was in Italy or where. And he did not know what your title was.
Right.
Would you share that story real quick?
Yeah, it actually was in Singapore, and we were in there. We were talking, and I was talking with the general manager first, and I was saying things that we could do to speed up the efficiency of the technicians and so on and so forth. And so I was out and I was talking to a couple of the technicians, and the way the guy was approaching it was he wasn't going to be successful. Let's put it that way. So I said, hey, how about if we try it this way? And so I asked him, I said, where are your tools for this and tools? He didn't know. And so we went to the stand, we got them checked out, we did all that kind of stuff. And so now together we're in there and we're working on this thing and everything else. And we pull it off pretty nicely, to be honest with you. And then I left. And the other guys come over and they said, well, how did that feel? Well, what feel? you're just working on the bike with the vice president of service for Harley Davidson Motor Company. He goes, bullshit, he's just a good guy. Okay? But again, I think part of that is, do you allow yourself to be the same as anybody else? And the day you don't, people start to sense that, right? And I've sat around campfires with other motorcyclists, right? And we're talking about anything and everything, and we get up and leave, and people will say, you know who that guy was? No, that's good. I don't want them to know. We're just average, ordinary people. I think there's another one of those keys to success. You don't have to toot your own horn. Somebody will toot it for you. And I had a question right there. Yes, sir.
Is it right choice to choose a career based on our own interest or hobby?
My career based on my own interests? Yeah, very definitely. At least the beginning of my career was. My father taught me how to do auto mechanics, okay? And I just had this, to be honest with you, when I was going to John Deere, I didn't care what they had me do. I'd have swept floors, I'd have shoveled shavings, I'd have done whatever they wanted, right? Because I just wanted to work for John Deere. But no question, getting placed in the apprentice training was a gift, because that definitely played to my skill set. It's something I was good at, and I was allowed to do it. But if you take a look at everything beyond my the general supervisor's job at John Deere, I went on to be the director of operations, and that was a complete different job. That's managing operations, got nothing to do with mechanical skills. So I think your career can lead you in different ways. So let's go back to my traveling to San Diego. So I get to Denver, okay? That's part of my plan. I'm going to be a great technician and so on. I get to Denver and I start reading this brochure and I go, wow, boy, Seattle looks pretty good to me. All right? Well, can you change your plans? Can you do all that? Can you head for Seattle instead of, you bet you can. All right? Might require some additional education, might require some different planning, all those kinds of things, but that's what I was up against at that point, is how do I take these transferable skills and use them in areas that I wasn't necessarily as well trained for, okay? And once you use those transferable skills, the kind of skills that get you in, the leadership skills, you can learn the technical sides of almost anything. If you can learn something, you can learn something else. So I started out that way, but I didn't end up in the career that I started with. Did that answer your question? I don't think it did.
He was talking about the motorcycle ride.
I'm sorry?
I mean, do you have interest in motorcycles?
Do I have an interest in motorcycles?
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
like, if I like about cars, so maybe the car industry is difficult to get in, and it's like a dream. I mean, enter a career based on my interest rather than.
Okay. Well, again, I love motorcycles. There's no question about it. I've got a 2-year-old motorcycle with 52,000 miles on it. Okay, so I like motorcycles, right? So, but that isn't necessarily what took me to Harley Davidson. What sealed it for me is when I spent 3 or 4 hours walking around that plant and seeing a plant that I considered to be a disaster, okay? And saying, I know how to fix that, okay? That's what I spent my last 10 years doing. The motorcycle was a bonus, because once I got there, I fell in love with the motorcycle and with the whole lifestyle of Harley Davidson. I absolutely love it, but it's not why I went there. I think if you can do that, if you can match up your passion with that's a bonus. There's no question. That's that motivation that she was talking about, right? I come in motivated every single day because this is what I've dreamed of doing all my life, right? That's outstanding. Good, thank you. I didn't think I answered your question. All right, next question. Yes?
Do you mind sharing me more childhood life, like how your parents raised you
Okay.
as an individual?
All right. Would you mind sharing your childhood life, how my parents raised me? Okay. Well, it was pretty interesting being 15 kids all home pretty much at the same time. My father used to call us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half the time he didn't know our names, right? But what they always did is they had a true love for their children, love for the family, love for the community, and they passed that on to us, okay? And they taught us, my mother, I never heard her say a bad thing about anybody, and if we did, she would say, stop it. You don't know what their life is like, and until you do, you don't talk bad about anybody. That was my mother, right? My dad, on the other hand, if you did anything wrong, he just whacked you. You know, I mean, that's just the way it was back then, right? But they were good people, good Christian people who, as I said, they raised us with a sense of fairness, a sense of integrity, and a sense of hard work. And it's worked well for all of us. You know, I told my father, I had left, Michelle and I got married and we moved, and I came back and I said, Dad, I never realized we were poor till I moved away, right? Because we had each other. You know, if one of my brothers gets mad at me, I don't care, I got 5 left, right? I can play with them. So, but we're always together as family. His brothers and sisters and all that, we were always together as family. And they taught us a lot of great values. Great values. Thank you. Other questions?
You didn't have that love for gears. What would you have went into?
Sorry, ask it again.
You didn't have that love for gears and mechanics. What would you have went into?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. If I didn't have the love for mechanics and gears and so on and so forth, what would I have gone into? Why? I don't know. I probably been a farmer, right? And I just kept farming until all my money was gone. I don't know. I never thought about it. I always had a mechanical aptitude. My father saw that. He developed it. And I never wanted anything else, you know? It's a good question. I may have to go back and think about that. Paul?
Isn't there a point when you became the vice president where you actually missed working on motorcycles? Because you probably didn't get the chance to do it on a daily basis.
Question was, when I got to be a vice president, was there an opportunity where I missed working on, no, because I still had 5 of my own, and I worked on them almost every night. I was always doing something. We had what we call guys' night, where everybody would bring their motorcycles over to other people's, and then we'd work on them. And so we never got too far away from the mechanics. Always did my own automobile repair. You know, we're always working on something. So you never got too far away from those roots. Or at least I never did.
Favorite
Rachel.
bike?
Pardon me?
Favorite bike?
Not a Honda. Obviously, I think there's a lot of people make good motorcycles. I think Harley Davidson is the only manufacturer that makes a motorcycle with soul. And that's what the big difference is for me. I've ridden every motorcycle that there is out there, and I'm telling you, they're good motorcycles. There's a lot of good motorcycles. There's no other motorcycle out there that has the soul of a Harley Davidson. And I'll always ride Harleys. Yes, sir.
As you moved up today to where you are today, what are your management practices, theories that you use that will be useful for us to enter the workforce?
Good. Good.
Managerial level.
Okay. So as I've moved up, what are kind of my principles that I go by, and the philosophies and so on and so forth that I've used to get there? I think the first one is, don't take yourself too seriously, right? I think titles are good because it helps people identify who's in charge, and at some point in your life, somebody's got to take responsibility, right? I never had a problem taking responsibility. I always had this big sign over my desk that says the buck stops here, right? But I think the real key is if you're going to be in leadership and you don't truly love people, don't be in leadership. Okay? Because if you don't truly love people, you're not going to be able to be, and a great leader, in my opinion, is a great servant. He's the one who will step up and do whatever needs to be done when no one else will do it, because it's all you know, right? And so to me, if you're not willing to be a good servant, if you don't love people, don't go into leadership. You will be bad at it, you will be miserable, and your people will be miserable. Beyond that, I think it really comes down to finding things that work and using them, finding things that don't work and don't use them. I mean, it's really a matter, there's 1,000 theories out there. And guess what? Theory X may work for this young lady, but it might not work for me, okay? Then she ought to use it and I ought to not, all right? But the key is there's tons of things out there you can use, tons of way to be successful. You got to try them out. But I think if you have that basic, okay, it doesn't matter that I was the vice president and so-and-so over here was a technician, right? We just have different roles. My role was no more important in the company than their role. In fact, theirs is probably more important because they could get things done that I couldn't, right? My role became a different role, kicking barriers down so they can get their jobs done, right? But you gotta love people, you gotta be willing to serve the people, kick the barriers down, and then in whatever philosophy, whatever leadership strategy works for you, go for it. But if you don't have those things, it's gonna be a tough push. Did I answer your question? Okay, all right.
Steve, you talked
Bill?
about the third of the employees, and so those third that were those college graduates, what did you all look for? Because you have a lot of applying.
Yep.
And so what were the characteristics that you look for, and what can help our students differentiate themselves from others?
Good, okay.
As they're going down into the workforce.
Okay, so what are we looking for in college graduate? What are the things that separate? Because we, as we said, a third, and a third we're looking for is college graduates, all right? What we did, and I think each company has to do this, right? Because not all companies are the same. What we did when we went out looking for college students, we developed 6 or 7 characteristics that says all of the people that have these characteristics are highly successful within Harley Davidson Motor Company, right? Not within General Motors, not within here, not within there, right? So, and it took us a while to get there. We used to go out and we'd take the highest GPA or we'd take this, you know what, and you know what? I hope I'm not offending anybody here, but we had people that go out, if you didn't have a 3.6, they wouldn't look at you. I said, crap, I want a 3.0 that's involved in everything. I want them in football, I want them this, I want them in community affairs, I want them, and they're still carrying at least a 3.0, right? Why? Because they're balanced. They understand that it takes more than just a 4.0 to go out and be successful. You got to work with people when you get out of here, right? And if you weren't successful with people in school, you won't be successful with people outside of school, okay? So we had developed those. Again, number one was integrity, always. And we'd ask things like, have you ever been in a situation like X, Y, Z, and how did you handle that? And then of course they'd make one up, and we could see that. And we'd say, could you give me a name, could you give me a name of a person that you work with that so we could do a follow-up? Well, then the story might change just a little bit. It's not the person I'm looking for, right? But you ask real strong questions around integrity, because if they got that, if you got somebody that has very strong integrity, they're never going to let you down. They'll be loyal, they'll be with you. You know what? If you come in with total integrity, and I had to teach you everything else, I'm okay with that, okay? You don't have integrity, I don't want you, okay? But beyond that, okay, hard work. You know, like I said, I'll take a 3.0 that's involved in sports and involved in the community and all, because they've already demonstrated to me that they understand that there's more to life than just purely academics, right? So we would also take a look at, and some of them we got at business school graduates, so they'd already been out in the market working. And so we would take a look at their past work life and those kinds of things. But I think each company has to decide, Bill, what are those 4 or 5 things that create highly successful people within their company, and then make sure that that individual has that. But number one in my book is always integrity. You have that look on your face. You want to ask me something? Come on, you do too. You do too. I can see it. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
When you look back
If I look back, what are the things I can be most proud of in my career? This is going to sound a little weird, but I think number one is my marriage. Number two is my family. And then I'll talk to you about work things. I think the key is that I moved from place to place to place to place and always found acceptance with the people. Okay? Because if I hadn't have found that, there's no success there, right? So I think the key is no matter how good you are at doing anything, how good you are at fixing things, again, it goes back that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's a relationship business, whether you think it is or whether it isn't, right? But I think some of the things, certainly that you know, I mean, I have to pinch myself every other day to think that a kid from a family of 15, from a town of 200, grew up to be a vice president of Harley Davidson. Yeah, I'm very proud of that. But I will tell you that all the titles in the world is not what gets you happiness, right? It's that sense of accomplishment, that relationship with other people, and building trust, and developing things that will last well beyond a title. So I think a lot of that has to come from things other than a successful story at work. That answer your question? Good, okay. Other questions? Rachel?
Biggest challenge of your career?
That one's fairly easy. Biggest challenge of my entire career was, we were born and raised in a little town in Iowa. Only thing we'd ever known, only church, only school, only anything we'd ever been to for 42 years, and picking up everything and moving to the East Coast where we knew no one and left all of our family behind. Okay? One more and I'll just have to. I thought that my wife changed my name to S.O.B. because that's all she called me for a year. It was a tough move. Now, she and I talk about it today. We're delighted that we did it. We had so many opportunities that we would have never had we stayed there, but no question, that was the biggest challenge. Leaving family, leaving everything behind that we knew, and moving on to something else, not even knowing if you would be successful at doing it, and then not having a happy camper with me. So. Yes, ma'am.
Just to tie along with that, do you think it would have been a lot different, or it would be a lot different for a student who's going to be doing something like that, whereas you and your wife? So the student who is going to do something like that, would you still, or how would you encourage them to do that, like you
Yeah, a very good question, I think. The question was, you had your wife, you at least had that right. What about a student who gets a job offer somewhere where they got, I tell you what, plan it out well. Make sure you have a support system in place, whether it's there or back here. It's tough. It's tough if you have a good support system with you. And guess what? You grow used to an environment, okay? So you're going to be in this environment for X amount of time. Everything you know is going to change. Now the neat part is everything's out there on the horizon for you, okay? Everything that can develop your life and your future relationships and all those things, all that is out there for you, okay? And you got to kind of do that more than you got to look at what you lost, right? Michelle and I have a theory. We never leave old friends. We go on to make new ones, okay? It's amazing. We've been gone from Waterloo for 22 years. I ran into one of my buddies the other day. It's like we had been together last week, right? So good friends never leave you. So you're not leaving friends, you're going on to make new friends, right? But do have some kind of support system in place to help you through those first couple of months, because it's tough. It's tough. I remember when I bought her a brand new car when we were out in York, my friends all said, "Are you nuts? She's going home." you know? But she stayed with me. So it is tough. That first couple months is tough. Make sure you have something in place to help you get through that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You applied at John Deere before they could technically hire you. For those of us like graduating in May, when would you suggest we start sending out resumes?
I think you cannot put a resume in front of, question was, I wanted to go in and interview at John Deere even before I was old enough to work there. Would you encourage, if you know what you want to do, start talking to people right now. They know you've got 2 years of education left. You might ask them, what things would you be interested in, as long as I'm keying my education already. If there's something you really are interested in, start keying it. Absolutely. It's not too soon to do that. And besides, every interview you go on teaches you 2 things. What to do and what not to do, right? Because you'll come back and go, oh man, okay, just don't do it the next time. That's no big deal. But if you never interview, you're never going to know, right? Every interview is a pot of gold for what you learn and what you learn how to do and how not to do. So I would absolutely say do that as quickly as you can. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, like, it's not easy to manage a big company, as well as like our life is go up and down and a little bit fluctuations. Like, I just would like to ask, like, do you want to share us your personal slogan or anything that inspired you behind, that keeps you going and stuff like that, like your personal philosophy?
Yeah, personal philosophies around. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days, right? So how do you keep going? What are the things that drive you, that inspire me or whatever, okay? My father, not a philosopher by any means, but he told me, he says, there is no such thing as a good life or a bad life. There's just life. So I will tell you, there's no such thing as a good day or a bad day. It's just a day, all right? It really comes down to what are we going to do with it. I'll give you a quick example. Can't remember the exact situation. Anyway, I was carrying something, the bottom of the bag that I was carrying, and it was wet, and it fell out and burst into a million pieces, okay? Now, what do you do at that point? This is a bad day, right? I paid a lot of money for this thing, right? So now it's up to us, isn't it? So, do I go, damn, and make my day bad? Or do I say, well, wish that hadn't happened, and clean it up and move on? Either way, the situation doesn't change. It's broke. It needs cleaned up, all right? So I can either clean it up and go on with my day, or I can be mad as hell about it. But the choice is still mine, right? That's the philosophy that I think got me through a lot of things. And I got to tell you, my lady reminds me of that sometimes when I kind of forget it, but it is. It's just, it's really more around attitude, all right? There's also a great presentation out there. I think it's floating around out there. It's Colin Powell on leadership. If you haven't read it, you absolutely should. I think this guy nails it, you know? You're not going to be everybody's friend every day. Get over it. We got a guy on the radio that says, life's tough, get a helmet, okay? You know, everything's not going to be rosy every single day. So what? Move on with life. I get another shot at it tomorrow, right? So I think that's more the philosophy that I've tried to use. I've not been 100% successful. I've had bad days, but my bad days were better because of that than they would have been if I hadn't, right? So I think that's the key is you got to make out of it what it is. And so if something bad happens, it's already happened. How you respond to that is all that's left. I can't put the bowl back together, right? It's broke forever. So what am I going to do with that? Okay. Yes, sir.
So saying all this, do you have any regrets?
Do I have any regrets? Not a one. Here's my belief about regrets. They take up time, they take up energy, they take up everything else, and they can't be fixed. Okay? Are there some things that I wish I hadn't have done? Yep, but I'm over it now. Okay? Because if you're not over it, It drags you down and everybody else down. It steals precious energy that you can use for something else. Biggest thing that you should learn, any one of you, is not to forgive others, but to forgive yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up. And you could feel bad about it. Get over it. Okay? Move on. All right? And if you can't forgive yourself, you won't be very good at forgiving others either. Okay? But I'd say, probably if I thought about it, there's probably a few regrets, but no. Move on. Other questions? Now, you might ask my wife if she has any regrets. I'll bet she could she could come up with a few, but she stuck with me for 46 years, so that's not a bad record either. So. Other questions?
Last question?
Yes, sir.
Where are sports involved in your life?
Sports? Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Probably mostly, I played some sports in grade school, but we didn't have a real developed program in grade school. But in high school, I played shortstop in baseball, and I was a center on our basketball team. Because you can this school that I'm going to, right, give you an idea how small it is. Michelle and I, we actually were classmates, okay? And we graduated the largest class that ever graduated from Don Bosco High School, 87, okay? So I was the tallest kid in school, so you better learn how to play center, right? But I played center for our basketball team, and I played shortstop for our baseball team. And I remember our coach for both was a guy named John Burkett. He coached basketball and baseball. And when I was playing shortstop one time, took a bad hop, hit off my shoulder and went by. And he blew a whistle, timeout. Okay? Phillips, you stop that ball with your glove, your body, or your face, but you stop that ball. That's how I learned to play baseball. Yep. That it? What? We got one over here.
Were there any women like higher up in Harley Davidson? I'm sure they have some in like for the women's gear and
Oh,
bags,
sure,
all
sure.
that. Were there any?
Her question was there any women that were higher up at Harley Davidson? Now, she's kind of stereotyping because she says, I'm sure they're in the motor clothes and all that kind of stuff, but our senior vice president of engineering is a lady named Michelle Combier. Our chief counsel, general counsel, the lawyer that does all of our stuff, like lawyers or not, Gail Leone, a female. Yes, we have several. Trying to think anymore. Several of them have changed. Cal Dimitros used to be our vice president of communications. So yes, it's a, I don't think that if you took a look at the percentage that it's equal to white males, not by any means, okay? But I think there's some very influential positions within Harley Davidson that have females in it, and they do an outstanding job.
What kind of characteristics do they display?
I think some of the characteristics are the same. If you said one word that described Michelle, tough as nails, okay, seriously. Very good at what she does. I mean, she's an excellent engineer. Gail Leone, same thing, very outgoing, very outspoken. But yeah, I think a lot of the characteristics are the same. And I know the old saying, you get a guy that's aggressive and he's, that aggressive guy. You get a woman that's aggressive and it's that bitch, right? I think a lot of that is going away. I really do. There's a lot of women that are in influential positions doing a great job, measuring against any human being that you want to measure, and they're doing a great job. I think that glass ceiling may not be shattered, but it's broke. I think you guys got some great opportunities.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Okay, I don't want to prolong it if you got no more questions.
Give it up for Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for all the great questions. I appreciate it.